So, look, basically what I want to run through this morning is, and I'm the only one here that can probably go through exactly how this happened. So there's a lot of confusion about where the breed was, how it started, what's in it, what the mix was. Doesn't really matter now, it doesn't really matter, but for those that are interested, I thought the best thing to do was actually get it down so no one can come out and say, oh, well, it was a secret or it was this or that. So it started initially from an idea of seeing Santanese sheep, which are a haired sheep in particular in Brazil, is where the Santanese originates. And like all sheep, it's a make-up of different broods to make the breed. So I came home, it was early 2000s, I suppose, and I said to my brothers then, look, we need to breed a haired sheep. We were involved with Dorper sheep, and they're very good sheep in the right environment, but we knew after having them here that they weren't the perfect option for, certainly for this country and a lot of other areas in Australia. So we set about how to go and create a breed. We've done a lot of work in genetics over the years with other breeds. We've had Texels, East Frisians, White Suffolk, Border Leicesters, and other breeds, obviously Coal Dorset, Dorset Horn, and seeing the evolution of where the breeds end up, where they go, where they start. In the homework, all breeds come from a sheep called a muffler, like all dogs come from wolves, all cows come from oryx, an ancient European cow. That's basically where they all come from. So we had to go back to the future. We needed haired sheep. So this is your starting broods, and there were some very important parts of what we did in this. The rams that we used were Von Ruys and White Dorpers, and those sheep that are sitting there are pretty indicative of the type that we bred. So the Von Ruy that we used was a very haired sheep. Now they grow a long hair. Some of them shed it, some of them don't. We didn't know a lot about the Von Ruys at the time, and we were more concerned about their very fat tail than we were about the shedding side. We were just concerned the fat tail might have been too much. We shouldn't have worried about that at all. The Dorper, pretty typical, that's a very good shedding Dorper, so it carries wool over the shoulder. So we crossed these breeds with two of our own stud ewes. They weren't just commercial ewes, they were stud ewes that were very even in type, and they were line bred, so closely bred, so you had consistency. So the first crossing was the Von Ruy ram over the Texel ewe, and the reason that we went that way is the Texel's very lean, so it compensated for the fatness of the Von Ruy. The Texel hasn't been so successful in Australia because of its leanness, because too many of the animals will cut dark, what the butchers call cutting dark, and that is they don't have enough fat cover on that hind leg. So if a butcher buys a carcass and it hangs for a week in the chiller, the meat will actually go dark, so the pH levels aren't right. So that's basically why the Texel hasn't been as successful here as it has in other countries, where they would go from the farm to the abattoir. We generally go farm into a stable yard and then into the abattoir, and that creates a problem. So those two were designed to counteract each other. The White Dorper rams with the Pole Dorset ewes, we just wanted to bring what those two breeds had into the picture as well. So one of the things that we're very, very adamant about is this sheep had to breed all year round, because it's about numbers of lambs on the ground, and 3 of those 4 breeds are polyoestrus, bred all year, which is the Von Ruy, the White Dorper and the Pole Dorset. Normally you put Texel into any mix, and that's the end of the breeding out of season. Very unusual, like Texel just won't join out of season. So we were pretty concerned about that. That's why 3 of the breeds had to have that in. What each breed brought to the table, I told you on the Von Ruy, was that hair pelt. There are other things that we'll go into later that they brought to the table we didn't even know about, which was luck. The Texel brings into it wonderful carcass shape and tremendous temperament. The Texel's an inquisitive sheep, walks up to you. Of all the breeds that we've been involved with, Texel is probably one that you can endear yourself to them very quickly because they're personable type sheep. The white Dorper, we wanted obviously another shedding breed in there. We wanted also their hardiness to do in fairly rugged conditions, which they're well famous for. And then Pole Dorsets, once again, carcass shape and growth rates. And really the Pole Dorset in this country is the, thanks Craig, is probably it's the barometer of what the lamb industry is. If you talk to any of the top abattoirs, the top processors, butchers, they will say we were after a second cross Pole Dorset lamb. So what we finish up with this breed is we've got to compete with the best in the breed, which is a Pole Dorset second cross. You're going to change those for me to the next slide. You know how to do it.
Someone showed me.
Oh, that's good. Right. Spent a lot of time chasing old photographs, so just bear with me on some of them. Are not great shots. So we finished up with an F1 or two F1s. One was a Texel Von Rue, as I've explained. The other was a Pole Dorset White Dorper. You'll see from the shots below that they still all had to be shorn, the whole lot. There's no way you could run those sheep without shearing them. So I think one shot on the bottom of wethers and ewes down the bottom. But basically there was some degree of shedding in the Texel Von Rue. There was basically an odd bare belly in the crosses with the White Dorper and the Pole Dorset. So it was a case of we put 200 ewes of each breed into the mix, and we just started crossing these to build a number of what would be commonly known as an F1 sheep. What was interesting when we were doing AI on these sheep, we would AI them, like the initial ones. Some of them were AI'd, some weren't. We had troubles putting different breeds together. They didn't. Von Rue Rams don't like anything with Von Rue ewes. That created a bit of a problem. So when we were doing some of the initial AI with these F1s, you could run the Von Rue Texels and the Pole Dorset Dorpers into one paddock, and we'd be programming on different days, and you could go into the paddock and you'd bring all the one lot F1s would come in, and the other lot, they'd be separate in the paddock. They didn't run together. And why that happened, we don't know. So they were all by Von Rues or by Dorpers, and there's a commonality in their ancestry as well. So that's where we started. And believe me, we had so many issues in those early crosses that I can remember one Dorset breeder being here one day and just said to me, he looked at me and he said, "Good luck, this is a failure now. It's not going to work." So, yeah, next one. So if anyone's got a question on the way through, just stick your hand up. Right, so then we move to the next cross. This is where we'll go with the green or the red. Red.
He's got two toys in his pocket. One's a red one, one's a green one.
Right, okay. I had troubles finding photographs of the early crosses, but these ewes were early crosses. I think so. Initially, we started with sheep that had a Von Rue Texel was a black tag ewe. We just put a black tag in its ear, so we knew that was that side, and then they were numerically tagged. We didn't keep pedigrees on those first sheep. We kept sires, but not pedigrees, because it's an F1. It's out of whatever Dorset ewe it was out of, or Texel, it didn't really matter. And the Pole Dorset crossed with the White Dorper was a white tag here. So we had black and white to start with. And then in the next cross, so we're crossing a Texel Von Rue ewe, was crossed with the Dorper ram. Now this Dorper ram was the same ram that was used over here. So we didn't go for new genetics, we kept the same genetics, so we've got control on it. And then we know what the faults are. And the faults that came out of the White Dorper was feet. legs, shoulders. Most of the drummers we had came out of this breed. So there's good things came out of it, but that was an issue. So when we got to here, the ewes in here, I think that ewe and that one I think were blue tag ewes. So a blue tag ewe was out of a black tag ewe in the second cross, or second generation. Same over here, so the Vonnery ram used here was the Vonnery ram there, same deal. So we knew where their dramas were and what we had to be looking for. If there's any spelling mistakes up there, it's because I was doing this late at night or early in the morning, and I'm the worst speller in the world too. I haven't seen it yet. So then these lambs were the next generation, but that ewe and I think this ewe was a red tag. Now those sheep weren't shorn, and they were the absolute cream of the crop. Once again, in the second generation, we had a lot of problems with feet, wool, carcass shape, you name it, we had problems with it. So when you pull one individual animal out, they might look great, but when you look at the whole lot, we were still screwing our face up. We had a long way to go. So that's our second generation. Yeah, that's that one. Right. So from that second generation, there's been some confusing information out there about this going for 4 generations to be a purebred. Basically, to be a purebred animal, you just need to put whatever you want in the mix and shut it down and not introduce anything else into it. Keep breeding it, and you'll get a type. That's common in every animal around the world. So basically, I explained that you had a blue tag from the black tag ewes, the second generation, and from the white tags we had a red tag. So it was black and blue were the next generation. So those sheep all ended up, and these rams here are not that. They're the rams out of that portion. So the very best rams, I think they were shorn at one stage, that particular group of rams, but it was a case of we pooled all the ewes, and then we started to join those ewes from the second generation to these rams. And sometimes we would use a blue tag ram on a red tag ewe, sometimes we use a red tag on a red tag. Didn't really worry us, we had to come up with a breed type. So, as I'm saying, now the fun began. And the fun was huge numbers, massive embryo programs, and huge amount of culling rate. So I mentioned some of the problems, and they were pretty simple. We had too much wool cover, we had a lack of pigment, in feet in particular, and we can see like white feet here. So that was a blue tag. So you can see there a little more Vonnery. So in that mix, you're 1/2 Vonnery over a Dorset white Dorper cross ewe, and on this side we had Vonnery Texel ewe with a white Dorper back over it. So we had better shedding in probably these, not as much carcass shape. We still had too much wool on these ones. White feet again. We did have one there with black feet. And I think, to give you an example, on our first embryo program, we did about 30 ewes, I think, Pete, from memory. I think we had about 3 sheep that had black feet. There might have been 3 that shed, and they weren't common. Black feet and shedding weren't common. So it wasn't there. It was still an idea in our head. It was still something that we were working towards. And it was something that we were very open with anyone that bought the sheep at any stage. They're not perfect. We'll stick with us. We'll get it right. So that was basically the problems. And they're just to give you an idea, blue tags, red tags. Yeah. Right. So this is actually the very first year that was flushed. She was a red tag, 2009 drop ewe, red 14. So that's Pete Lynch, that's still here doing work. That's the tubes out, being flushed into a dish in there, and that's the ewe recovering. You notice she had a fair bit of wool cover. She would have been shorn and white feet, but that's what we're working with at that stage. So On the embryo side, we had done a lot of embryo work in other breeds, so we're pretty experienced in it. We were flushing these ewes at pretty young ages. This first flush, I grew the ewes out. They were only about 10 months old, but grew them very quickly, and they were fat as seals, and they didn't flush very well at all. So the next time we let them grow naturally, they weren't as fat, they weren't as well grown, but they actually flushed better. So we learned a lot on that side as well. Well, this is when it started to get interesting. So these animals here, these were used on display in 2011 that were the first embryos out of that first flush. So we started to get the pigment coming in correctly, but that's a bunch picked out of, well, that's 10 years out of 200. You put the other 190 there, it wouldn't have been a pretty picture. So these rams here are some of the out of the same flush. They had been shorn. They'd all been shorn at one stage because, and even when we go through some of these sheep here later, at certain times of the year in Oberon they don't look pretty. So to promote the breed properly, we were shearing at that stage. So rams in here, like this ram here, I think finished up. I think he was the first champion in Sydney. That might have been the reserve. 65, 52, 16. You'll see rams here like that had a definite bearing. This fellow was totally bare, so they were still hybrids. The odd one ticked the box. If you could put them all together and the best parts of each one, we would have had it right up front. So that was the best of what we had. Okay, thanks. So when we started flushing, we were flushing red and blue tag ewes. There was not as many blue tag ewes in, and the reason for that is the Pole Dorset was in the background, and it kept throwing back to wool on us all the time. We just constantly selecting for breed type, and we had in our mind what animal we wanted to come up with in the end, and that was this bloke here. He wasn't overly big. He still had wool cover, but he did have colour in his feet and the dark pigment and the right head. So that was the ram that we sort of said, right, well, once we're here, if we can keep repeating that with carcass shape, body depth and whatever. I think the ram was probably only about 80 kilos ring wet. He wasn't nearly as big as what we have today. Not that big, they have to be big. That was a group of ewes that were sold at the first sale in 2013, so they weren't the best of the ewes, but they were ewes that, and you'll notice they had an orange tag at that stage, so that's a red tag, and he would have been the sire of some of those ewes. So the orange tag was what we called stabilised. Was it stabilised? No, but it sounded good, so we said it's stabilised. And by stabilised, our idea on that was we had not introduced any other ram into the breed since that fella's father. So since the Dorper and the Von Rui were used, and it was basically 3 rams from each breed, nothing else has been used except their progeny, which are rams like this, red tags, and then we moved on to using orange tags.